isn't about music, but it is about getting your snowblower ready. So let's take a look at the snowblower and see what we can do to save some money and do some maintenance things that'll save you money in the long run. This is Frank's garage. Okay, so here we have our Ariens 624 snowblower, and I bought this a couple years ago, and it's a great snowblower, and it's already I think 5 or 6 years old, but you can see the condition. I keep it in good condition here, but we're going to go through some things to help you keep yours in good condition so it doesn't fail you and you're not ending up in the shop. I know a lot of people around this time, it's October, they're backlogged on the repairs in the shops, so it's a good time now to take a look at these things. So let's get started. Okay, so first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the traction system here on the snowblower and make sure that the tires rotate freely. A common problem with snowblowers is the wheels will seize to the axles because of rust over time. People don't remove them and check them or grease them. So we're going to do that, but first we have to get it in the maintenance position. And how we do that is we make sure the oil cap is tight. If you have half a tank of gas, it's probably better, but if yours doesn't leak here and you've got a little more than half a tank, it should be fine, but you can always unscrew this cap, put a plastic bag on it, and cover it back up before we tip it into this maintenance position. So let's do that now. Let me turn this around. It's a little hard to turn with both the wheels engaged. And I'm just going to position some cardboard or whatever you can do underneath here, just in case there's any oil leaks or anything. Bring this over. And we're just going to tip it just like this. Tip it in the maintenance position. Get it away from the door here. Alright. See if we got you close enough here. Okay, now what you're going to see here is the belly pan, and there's some 3/8 bolts here we're going to take out. So let's get our 3/8 ratchet. Now I already went through this, but I'd like to go through it again just to show people, help them out a little bit, save some money, make your snowblower run for a long time. Because winters can get rough here in Buffalo. I'm from Cheektowaga here near the airport. Things get rough. So we got to be ready for it. Okay, we'll set these bolts here. There's also one bolt here on the side and one bolt here. I'll get my scarf on, it's cold. Get this off. Let's set all these screws together here. Giving me a hard time. So it's a little tough with the wheel, but you should have enough room with a small ratchet here. If not, you can try removing the wheels first. So we're going to take our pan off here. Now typically what you'd see in this pan is you'd see a bunch of rubber, and that's from this friction disc here. And that's normal. You know, it's a good idea to clean that out of there. So we're going to clean that, just clean it up a little bit. Now, like I said, I already went through this, but normally you'd see a lot of rubber in here. So we're going to clean that up. And we'll set this aside here. Now I just want to show you the friction drive system and how it works here. So here we have the friction drive, and basically what happens is when you hit that clutch lever up there, this disc is going to rise up, and this spins with a belt. Spins around. And then it'll come in contact with this wheel here that has rubber on it. And that's what drives, you can see it turning. That's what drives your wheels. So it's important that you lubricate here by the gears. You don't want any grease or anything on that friction disc or the plate. And if the plate is dirty, you can certainly wipe it down. And you want to put some grease here on this shaft. Now I'm going to try to show you how this works, basically because of the disc and where it lands on this wheel controls the different speeds. So I'm going to try this lever over here and see if you can see. I'm going to do the speed lever 1, 2, 3, and you'll see this wheel move back and forth. See if I can get you in there close enough. You see how I'm using the lever, and that gear goes back and forth, and depending on where it lands, that's going to be the speed that you're going to be going at. Okay, so you definitely want to make sure that that's all lubricated in there, and that your cables here, you know, they don't have too much play in them. You can see that controls there. You know, any cleaning you can do inside, the better. So that's the first part of it, and should make sure you check you have enough rubber on here and that the rubber isn't cracked, because then you'll have to replace this rubber wheel here, part of the friction disc system there. But as long as you oil everything or grease it, and make sure you don't get any on this wheel or that rubber wheel there, you should be fine. Okay, so that's the first part of what you're going to have to check over. Now let's get to the second part, remove the wheels, and we'll grease up the axles. Okay, we're at our wheels here, and to remove them, you're going to see something similar to this, and you just release it, pull the pin out, and if you're lucky enough, your tire is going to come off. And there we go. The tire came off nice. It doesn't always come off nice if you don't do this maintenance to it. Now you can see on here I have some never sees. So what you basically want to do here, here's the never sees here. You can get a good shot of that. We come over here. Let me set you down here for a minute. Got to open this container. Then we get a little bit on there. I just rub a little bit on the axle here. You don't have to do totally around the axle, because once you put the wheel back on, you spin the wheel and it'll work it in there. So this is a Permatex anti-seize lubricant. Very good stuff. I use it on the car. Very good stuff. It'll keep it from seizing up. So let's put this wheel back on here, and you would repeat the same process for the other side. And then what we do is we just want to line up this pin here and turn it around as you're going, and it'll eventually find the hole there. There we go. And then we'll just clip it back in there. It's a little tough with that lubricant stuff on your hands. Make sure it spins good, looks good, and that's going to keep it from seizing up on you, because with all the snow and the water that's getting in there, those wheels are very hard to get off if those seize. So that's another check that you can do, and something that you can do preventatively. So let's flip her back, put this cover back on first, then we'll flip it over, and we'll take a look at some other maintenance things that we can check. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at these augers. We're going to make sure that they spin freely, and we're going to grease them. And I'm going to explain to you what the shear pins do, in case you don't already know, and why they're important. So down here we have our gearbox here. Now you don't want to get into having to replace that, because you have to split this unit apart. You've got to take everything apart here. You're probably going to need a puller to pull off some of those gears to get this out of here. It's not a fun job. It's not impossible, but it can be prevented, and I'm going to show you that here. So what first we're going to do, now you can test it without removing the pin. If you just moved it a little bit, there's a shaft that runs through the center of these augers, and if you turn it just like that, you can probably be pretty certain that they're free. It's not seized up. If this was seized up, this would not move at all. But we're going to take it further, and let me get a socket here, and we'll remove this shear pin, and we'll spin it freely and make sure that it spins, and we'll also take a grease gun and we'll grease the grease fitting here. So let me grab that socket here. I think it's it. Let's see what we got. No, we need a bigger one. Let's try this one. Yep, that's the one. See what it says here. I can't read what's on it. Just, you'll find one. That's probably the easiest part. It's just a small socket. Then I'm going to place a crescent wrench on the top. And I'm going to remove this shear pin here, which I already have loose. Take it out. And I don't know if you can see that. The shear pin, let me try to get focused a little better. See how it has these indents in it, and the metal it's made from is softer metal, so it's designed to break off if there's any obstruction in these augers. But what can happen is if this is seized to the shaft here and it's not lubricated properly, it's frozen to the shaft, so the shear pin really has no use at that point. So what will happen is you'll end up snapping a gear in this gearbox, and you want to protect that gearbox. So what can we do? Well, we're going to spin it around. Of course, I had already lubricated it, but I'll show you how to do it here. It's very simple. I just have this grease gun here, which isn't that expensive. It's worth having one of these around, and this will work for many different kinds of fittings, grease fittings. And then I just use these tubes inside of it. It's just a lithium general purpose grease. Very cheap. I think you can get a pack of these 3 or 4 for, I don't know, $5 or $6. And the grease gun wasn't that much. So what you want to do is you stick your grease gun into that fitting there. Just stick it into there, squeeze it, and then what you're going to see is you're going to start to see grease coming out of some of these holes here, and you might see grease coming out at the end of this auger here. You can wipe off any excess grease and just rub it. Rub it on the gears here instead of wasting it and wiping it away. And you want to spin this. It's kind of hard with that plastic there. We'll spin it. It's moving nicely. So we're going to put this pin back in. Basically just turn the shaft. Keep your pin in there until you feel it where it finds the hole there, and then we'll tighten that up Not a big deal. I think you guys know how to tighten up a bolt. And the other side is the same procedure. Just remove the pin, use the grease fitting with the grease gun, spin it around. Now while you're down here, it's a good idea to take, I have a brush with some bar and chain oil on it here. See if I can get this. I use some of this bar and chain oil. Pretty cheap stuff. It's just bar and chain oil, and I have a little container here where I have a little brush. And it's a good idea to go in here and just, you know, put some of that onto the auger there where it's most likely to rust, which is usually inside here at the welds. You know, grease up your augers real nice or oil it up there. You don't want to put too much oil. Make sure you have some cardboard or something underneath the unit or it'll get all over the place. You know, just go around like that, do your auger, see any rust on it, and that's it for the auger part. Make sure that you don't have any leaks here around the gearbox. That looks good. This is actually your gearbox filler hole. If you were to change the grease or the oil inside of there, that's the screw that you would remove. So everything looks good there. I'm going to tighten it back up, and then we'll take a look at some other things we can look at. Okay, so we've looked at the auger, and we understand that if there's any obstruction in the auger, those shear pins should break, and that saves your gearbox. But as we went over, if the augers are any way seized to that shaft, then you've got problems because those pins won't break. And more than likely what's going to happen is the gear inside of that gearbox is just going to be crunch up. It's going to be junk. So very important stuff there. So now let's go take a look at the spark plug, which is an important thing to check. So we'll just take this spark plug wire off here. A lot of people do that when they're working on the machine. It's probably good practice, but I have the gas turned off and it's not going to start, so I'm not worried about it. So let's find our socket here. And this is I believe it's 13/16. And let's get the spark plug out of here. Take a look at it. And then you can take it out by hand here. Let's get a look at it. Now I did do all this already, so it's probably going to be clean. I hope it's clean. So there's my spark plug. Looks pretty good. So what you want to do is if it's black or anything like that, you can clean them up. A lot of people replace them right away. You really don't have to replace it right away unless this ceramic part is cracked. Or if you've tested it, which you can do by, you put the spark plug in here and then set it against something metal there, and then you would crank it up and you should see a spark flying from there, from the end of the spark plug. So that's a good test you can do on any small engine. So we would clean this with a wire brush, or you can lightly take some sandpaper, clean it, wipe it down, spray it with some carb cleaner just to get the carbon off of it. And once it's set and you've checked the gapping of it, make sure the gapping is correct. You can find that in the owner's manual, service manual. So that looks good. So we'll put this back in and then we'll take a look at some other things. Okay, so we've popped the spark plug back in there, and you move this over a little bit, and you just want to make sure that your speed selector is greased up in there. You can put some grease in there with your finger. A lot of times I'll take it from that tube I have those tubes of grease, and I'll just open one up, stick my finger in it, and just go around and grease things. You have your chute here. It's important to grease right here. You can also remove these two screws, lift this cap off, and grease that gear that's inside. And you want to grease here is where your chute turns. It makes it much easier to operate if you just put some grease here. You can even disconnect this linkage here, remove it entirely, and get in between these plates here where it slides around, and make sure that's lubricated good. You want to check if you have one, a starter. This can also be removed. There's only a few bolts here, and you can remove it and lubricate inside the starter. That's another thing you can look at. And oil is most important. I do mine every season because it's only takes about half a quart of oil, 5W30 for this. And where you can empty it, let's go over here. As you have, that's where you drain the oil out here. So what you could do is put a pair of vice grips on this here, and then take a crescent wrench and just loosen that up and tip the machine backwards. Then the oil will drain out. You know, if it's black or anything like that, it's definitely a good idea. Like I said, for the cost of it, it's only half a quart. It's worth saving your machine, because these machines work hard in the winter time when they're throwing that snow around, especially around here. So that's one thing you can do, and then you just fill it right here, and make sure you check your level as you're filling it. Wipe the stick down and make sure you're in between those hash marks it shows on the stick. Another thing you want to look for is any oil leaks or anything around the motor. I don't see anything. It's nice and clean. You know, wipe it down. You can take some silicone and spray it inside the chute. And you can also take some silicone, if you haven't oiled, use bar or chain oil on the auger and on the inside of the housing here. It also helps to throw the snow farther because of the surface is slippery. So another thing we're going to do now is we're going to take off the belt cover, and we're going to check out those belts. Alright, so we're going to take a look at the belts here, and I don't know if you can see every snowblower is going to have some kind of belt cover, and the screws are going to vary. You might have one here and one on the side on each side. I just have one on each side here. It's a 3/8. Easy to get off, so let's pull this off of here. Put that out of the way. So here we have our pulleys here. We have a tensioner here. This is the drive for the auger, and there's another belt. I don't know if you can see it back here, and that's for the drive. Now that spins continuously, and the way that's engaged is when you press obviously the wheel engagement up there. Now you'll see that when I hit the clutch part, which powers your auger, you're going to see how it tightens that belt to the shaft there, and that's what spins it. Now this can be adjusted here. If you have a lot of slack in your belt, you can take this bolt, loosen it up, and this pulley here can slide back and forth. So you can do that to a certain point as your belt becomes stretched, but eventually you're going to have to get a new one. So the basic things you just want to look for are cracks in the belts. You know, try to engage the wheels and hold the machine back, and make sure the wheels spin properly. Obviously it's not under load right now, so you really can't test whether the augers are gonna stop while you're snow blowing, but you could be certain if this is tight, and you're gonna want to have a little bit of play in it, because when it's not engaged, this spins and the belt doesn't move. So if you're running your snowblower and you see that the augers are moving and you don't have that handle engaged, you're going to want to make an adjustment here to this tension. Now what I do is I go in here, because I don't like rusty shafts and things like that, you know. I like it all clean, the metal, and over time it'll just get corroded. So I put I just take a little bit of oil, not a lot, or grease, and just grease the front and back of these. Don't grease the top of them, obviously. Make sure they spin good. Everything looks good. So there's no problem here. You go in here, put a little grease on these springs here. Wherever you can apply any grease on this metal to help keep the water off of it and keep it from rusting. You can even reach down there, is where the shaft is, and take some grease and put some grease inside there. So everything looks good here. I did already go through all of this, but I just wanted to show what you would do and what you would check. Now it's going to vary slightly from snowblower to snowblower, but for the most part you're going to see the same kind of setup here. So that's how we look at and inspect the belts, and let's see what we can do next. Okay, now except for it making sure it runs properly, which I've already done. I've checked my spark plug, the gas is fresh. Another tip is to, if you have one, now you should have one. If not, you can always put one in. It's not that hard. From the tank to the carburetor, there's a fuel shutoff, and what I'll do is whenever I run this, especially when you're putting it away, for the winter, or for the summer rather, I would run it out. I would run the machine, turn this off, and let the machine bog out and starve for gas, and that'll ensure that the carburetor is empty and you won't get a bunch of gummy garbage in there. Another thing I do is, I do have the electric start, which I very rarely use, but I do use it once in a while just to keep it working, is remove 4 bolts here and remove your where you start it, your hand starter there, and put a little grease inside of that. You want to check these linkages down here, which is what controls the auger, and also the traction disc there for engaging the drive. Put some oil on those. Basically the idea is anywhere that you can oil it is going to help to make it last longer. It's not going to rust as quick. So I think that concludes our video for today, and I hope that's helped you out with some basic maintenance tips to keep your snowblower running for a long time. Keep it in great shape, and thanks for watching the video.